Okay, so we are going to chat tonight about gluten-free and dairy-free eating, some tips and tricks, because I know quite a few of my clients just feel their best being gluten and dairy-free, but it can be a big overwhelming change. And sometimes some people can tolerate a little bit of each, some people can tolerate none. So it does really
Mhm,
vary person to person. And so we will go through a little bit about grains, nuts, seeds, dairy, sweets, and then some of my favorite brands. So gluten-free grains. There are even more options than this, but rice, oats, quinoa, those are probably three of the most common grains. And so there are a few other, higher carb starches that we might do like potatoes or squash. I consider those more of a vegetable than these are
mhm,
grains. And so all of these are really great options. They're going to be high in fiber, but most of them need to be, cooked ahead of time. There might be some products you find that are like pre-cooked rice in a bag or pre-cooked quinoa in a container. Of course, there is like, yes, some people want to avoid as much plastics, especially if we're microwaving it, which I recently was like, yeah, I should probably pour the rice out into a container, microwave it. We know that microwaving rice or microwaving plastic can be a little bit risky with getting those plastics into our food, um but yeah, I would say rice, oats, and quinoa are probably the three most common that I see people go for, and they're all going to be fairly bland, so we want to season them up with different flavors. But then farro, barley, and millet are also some more common. I'd say farro and barley are kind of similar to a rice. That could be done cold or hot. Millet, I'm really not super familiar with. Um, I will say that also with some of these, um, the way that we are soaking them, same with beans, I'm gonna talk about that in a minute here, and preparing them can sometimes change how we digest them. So, the Weston A. Price Foundation, Mindy, have we talked about that foundation and their blogs and stuff a little bit?
mm-mm,
They
no,
have some really great articles on how to do this, if you wanna learn more. I think I have some info about it on the other slide. So we'll come back to that topic of soaking.
okay,
Um, so soy is another thing that oftentimes people will go to when they're not doing as much dairy. So soy is tofu is made from soybeans. Soy milk, tempeh is very similar to tofu, and then edamame is the like green like soybeans. So these are all really good sources of protein. Soy is actually the highest plant protein source. It's going to be like low in fat, mostly just protein. Um, there is some controversy about soy. I don't know if you've heard anything
no,
about
uh-uh,
people. Some people are more pro soy, some are more against soy. So, um, I would say that the soybean oil is not quite as nutritious. So, the thing about soy is that it acts as a phytoestrogen, it's called. So the like chemical compound in the body that it's broken down into, and it's similar to estrogen. And so some people already have too much estrogen, um,
mhm,
whereas some people don't. So it that is sometimes where like getting that testing done could help you to know that. Typically, I would say, people who are struggling with weight, they might have too much estrogen or periods being heavy or PCOS. Those are some people I would be like, okay, you maybe have too much estrogen. Whereas once people get to menopause, their estrogen starts declining. It's not as much of a concern. But you'll see this infograph here that I again got this from the Weston A. Price Foundation. They're talking about how soybean oil has a lot of estrogen and is often used in more processed foods that are not going to be very nutrient dense anyways. So, usually I'm encouraging people to limit these foods like fries and fried chicken anyways. Um, Whereas like fermented soy, like tempeh, and like edamame, those are really great sources of other nutrients too, and the protein. And so most people are consuming those in moderation anyways, and they're a great thing to include. Um, and so this is just a quick research highlight that was done on the impacts of soybean oil, which is something that's been used a lot more recently, they looked at mice and they did coconut oil. So they had 4 groups. One of them was coconut oil, which is more of a saturated fat content. One of them was half coconut oil, half soybean oil. The other was coconut oil and fructose, which is a carbohydrate that's like more of a sugary carbohydrate. I mean, they're all similar glucose content in the body, but fructose is going to be more likely to spike our blood sugar. So it's like in high fructose corn syrup. And then the last group was half coconut oil, half soybean oil, half fructose. So they all had the same calories. And they basically found that the mice who were eating more soybean oil were gaining more weight. And so, um, even though it's sometimes considered a healthier oil because it doesn't have as much saturated fat, I oftentimes have shared with people that saturated fat's not always the problem. Um, it's more of the like processing of some of these oils. So, that was just kind of an interesting study. But soybeans are really common in certain cultures like Japanese culture, and I definitely don't want people to be scared to eat things like tofu and edamame. It would be more soybean oil that I would limit. Um, okay, so beans are another great substitute for bread or things that contain gluten. Um, they are really commonly consumed in cultures that are part of the blue zones, which are like the parts of the world where there's the most people that live past 100. So it's really interesting to just study these cultures and different parts of their society, what they're doing. And so a lot of them do consume beans, lentils, peas, and chickpeas. And they are going to be really rich in the soluble fiber, prebiotic fiber that's good for our gut. They'll also have some B vitamins that are good for blood sugar control. And so, even though they are going to be a carb, they're broken down to glucose, just like soda or fruit would be. They are a little bit better for blood sugar because of all that fiber. Some people, though, do really struggle to digest them. So, that's again where the proper preparation and soaking of them is important, as well as taking that approach of if you do have severe digestive concerns, working with a dietitian to see maybe beans are not for you. But again, it's something that I usually am seeing people consume more in moderation, like a fourth cup a day. Because they're just, yeah, they're they're pretty filling. Maybe up to a cup a day. And they all have pretty similar protein carbs, but a little bit different vitamins and minerals because there are a lot of different types of beans. Um, And so here is some of the info from that Weston A. Price Foundation about um, history of grains, corn, and beans. So they said that a lot of societies they didn't eat super large quantities of grain-based foods such as like breads, pastas, but they did eat these grains when they were soaked and fermented. Um, because this helps to break down what's called phytic acid, which is why it's easier to digest. So basically here, this part on the bottom is what I would want you to take note of is how to prepare these for optimal digestion. And I again had never really learned this until recent years. I never would soak oatmeal. And so I personally feel fine just making oatmeal straight from the bag when I buy it. But if you're someone with impaired digestion, this might be what you wanna do, and I have started using dried beans a little bit, and so I will sit them in a pot of water overnight before I cook them in my crock pot, since I've learned this information and I know, okay, maybe that would just be easier on my system. And same with sourdough breads. I do try to look for fresh baked ones if I'm going to, or the sprouted breads like the Ezekiel bread. Um, so like, I know Gateway Market near me has the sourdough bread fresh baked, or a lot of different bakeries will, but if you do look at some of the sourdoughs in, like, grocery stores and they have other things added in, like gluten, soy flour, vegetable oils, yeast, they're not, like, the most true sourdough where they're, like, the easiest to digest. It's actually kind of crazy how some people who are quite sensitive to gluten can do okay with sourdough because of how it's fermented. So, there is gonna be a difference one of those just times where we want to look at labels. Um, so yeah, nuts and seeds. I think they are a great addition, especially when we're taking out something like dairy. I think they can have kind of that similar co- consistency, not the same flavor, but like kind of substitute that condiment maybe where you would put cheese instead, you do nuts. Or for a dessert, I have some ideas later. But nuts and seeds are going to have all three macronutrients, just kind of a fun fact, protein, fat, and carb. The fat type will vary. So just kind of a reminder that we want to prioritize those omega-3 fats. Oftentimes we have more of the omega-6 now, just our current food supply. We've used more of those oils that are omega-6 rich. Also, the way that we're feeding our animals, we're feeding them more foods that have omega-6, so that's transferring to their meat having more omega-6. So, have a chart coming up on that. Also for and people with impaired digestion, sometimes nut butters can actually be a little easier to break down because makes sense, they're already ground up. Your digestive system is doing a little bit less of the work. Um, so this is that pathway of omega-3 versus omega-6, seeing how they compete in the body for pro-inflammatory and inflammatory and anti-inflammatory pathways. The way they say it, inflammation resolving. That means anti-inflammatory. So they are fighting for the same pathway. That's why we want to decrease omega-6 a little bit, increase omega-3 to support inflammation, along with other habits like stress management and exercise too. This is a chart maybe you would just want to screenshot or just remembering that these ones on the bottom are going to be the best omega-6 content. The hemp seed, oil, flaxseed, walnuts, whereas some of these other ones are just, they have more of those omega-6. It's not that we can't ever have these, it's just that's kind of a concern for some of my clients that have chronic inflammation. And then the olive oil, avocado oil, why I love those is because they are a little bit more neutral. They don't have a lot of either of those. So there's the topic of fats is one that has a lot of different kind of little nuances, but yeah, just remember these ones on the bottom are going to be most anti-inflammatory. Our saturated fats that aren't on here are like coconut oil, butter. Butter is going to have dairy, but coconut oil is a great option too. Okay, just a little background for dairy because I do think that this is one that more people will tolerate and include than gluten. Dairy does have a lot of really great nutrients in it, a lot of vitamins, minerals. There are just different types of dairy that will impact us differently. So A1 versus A2 dairy, that is like the type of protein found in dairy, can influence how inflammatory it is to certain people. Genetics can play a part with this too. So there actually is now in like Whole Foods and Target are for sure stores that I've seen carry a brand called A2. So that is a product that I encourage some people to try if they feel like dairy is not going well for them and they want to get a little bit of that back into their diet. And then fermented dairy too. So yogurt and kefir, which have probiotics in them, can sometimes help people to break down the dairy better and have that added benefit for gut health, compared to just milk or cheeses or ice cream. And then another kind of just background on dairy that it may impact insulin through it's called insulin-like growth factor. Some studies find that that may contribute to certain cancers, but that's still fairly inconclusive. There's also some studies showing that Mediterranean style of eating decreases risk of other types. That's maybe just more of a reason of why people may choose to limit some dairy. It's just really heavy in our culture, and it's maybe even just decreasing it is going to show some benefits for certain genetic variants. through that mechanism was what I was going for. And then there's also some potential differences between organic and non-organic because of the amount of pesticides, antibiotics, and growth hormones we put into our non-organic dairy. That's kind of another subject that it's hard to research that. I do like to try to choose more organic when I can, just because of that. Um, and then oftentimes also the full fat versus low fat dairy is a little bit confusing for people. I am totally fine with all of my clients choosing full fat dairy. It's not typically a calorie problem when we're having it in moderation. And there's actually a fat in there called heptadecanoic acid that is really has a lot of health benefits, and we can't get that in a lot of other foods. Um, so the fat can also help stabilize blood sugar. So um, if you're having it in moderation with a meal, that can be a really great option. Same with cheeses, they're gonna have some fat. We don't need to always choose like the low fat ones. As long as we're in still a good calorie range for our goals. Um, so covered a lot of confusing dairy topics there. This is just a nice research chart showing the A1 casein causing a little bit more intestinal inflammation for some people. Kind of confusing way to read this chart, but that's the summary. So that was a topic that I had never learned about until recently when I did my functional nutrition course. They brought that up and I was like, wow, I never knew that. So interesting. So dairy alternatives, if you are choosing to limit dairy for milks, I mean, any of the plant ones, soy, almond, coconut, oat, I think can be great options. The soy is going to be highest in protein. The oat is a little higher on the glycemic index, so causing a little more blood sugar spike, but I think it tastes better than the others, so I still use a little bit of it with coffee sometimes. And then for cheeses, personally not a huge fan of the like plant-based cheeses in stores, and I don't get great feedback from others who have tried those, but if you like them, great. I just think that using like guacamole, hummus, or tahini for me can kind of give that same creamy alternative flavor, texture with like a wrap or a sandwich or a salad. And then ice cream, some ideas would be using like coconut milk based yogurt and then putting toppings on it. Banana nice cream is a recipe that if you Google, you'll find lots of ways to do it. It's basically frozen bananas. You blend it up. You can add like some nut butter and cacao powder. So it's like bitter chocolate powder that doesn't have much sweetness, but then that banana adds the sweetness. You could do a little honey with it, blend that up, or a similar like smoothie type recipe where you do like protein powder and fruit, um, or even just doing like frozen fruit and then you melt some dark chocolate, drizzle it on there, put that back in the freezer, let that harden. I think all of those give a good sweet alternative. And then a few other ideas for sweet items to replace those gluten dairy based sweets. So I have some of these on my brand guide that I'll send you guys. Um, Chocolate sun butter. So sunflower seed butter. There's plain, but then I recently tried the chocolate one and I thought it was pretty good if you do like dark chocolate. Again, chocolate protein smoothies, banana and ice cream. There are some gluten or some dairy-free chocolate chips too that you can find that are like Lily's brand is one. Then also doing like Olipop drinks, which again, sodas don't have don't have gluten or dairy, but I think that um the Olipop drinks are just a good sweet option. Using the sweet drops too, you could do that with like I've done like a coconut or an oat milk drink where I do like a creamsicle one with like a little bit of either orange juice or those sweet drops. So kind of just getting creative with drink combos if you do want a sweeter option with a meal or as a snack. Also using, of course, whole fruits can be a great option, or fruit-based like jams, dried fruits in moderation. Even like being like doing like a sweet potato with some jam and nut butter, I think is a great combo. Um, And then, of course, also working on all of our other tastes too, our bitter, sour, bland tastes that can really help our body to just crave less sweet things too. Um, okay, so don't need to screenshot this. I have the QR code, but a few things that I added recently that I really have liked. I'm trying to remember it. The Cocoa Yo yogurt I found at Whole Foods. Um, what else did I add? Some of the snacks over here. So like, um, yeah, some of these are new ones that I've tried recently. The like Chomps meat sticks I've really been liking. The Jackson's is a brand of chips I like, as well as Siete that are both going to be gluten-free carb options. Um, what else? Got the Cindy's Kitchen is some really great salad dressings I've found at Whole Foods. Primal Kitchen, of course, is always one of my favorite, and all of those I believe are dairy free. Um, the Chef Hacks Ranch was really good. I think it does have dairy in it though. And probably all of these bars are also gluten free too. So yeah, I'll send that. Closing thoughts, remembering that we can include fats in our diet. So if we're taking out dairy, which for some people is a good source of those fats, we want to add it back in with like nuts or avocado or those oils, even if it's saturated fat. So beef and eggs and butter can be great. Testing out new products gradually. Maybe setting a goal of trying a few new products or recipes a week, so that you aren't feeling stagnant and like you have no options when you make these changes. Um, and then grabbing this ebook here has the brands as well as a couple new meal plans. I'm really working on like condensing my meal plans to be really simple. I have a couple on there that are pretty long and lengthy. So, couple new ones. So yeah, that's everything. Any questions, thoughts, Mendy?
Well, the good one number one thing is it's good to know that choices that I have made or are making are the right choices. So I'm like, score. That's awesome. I did have a couple a question about the A2 dairy. Did you say that you saw a product at Target? Is that what you said?
Yes, it's a red container and it says A2 in like big letters. So, Target and I'm sure Whole Foods has it. They have a lot of those odd brands, but yeah, give it a try. I mean, in yeah. Hmm.
And then the other day, I was craving, I thought in my mind I was craving some chocolate or whatever. And I had some Lily's dark chocolate chips from something that I'd made before. And I had like two, and that was just all I needed. Like I was done. I was moving on. I was
Hmm.
not thinking about, oh, I could eat the whole package, but it
Yeah.
was just enough treat to kind of, satisfy whatever craving I was having and moving on. So that was
Mm.
a beneficial too.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that stuff on hand too. I think that's like such a great
Yes.
like
Yes.
mental space to be in where you're like, I can have these options on hand that I feel good about, and I feel like I'm going to still be able to have that sweet taste, or maybe you want to like, do a ritual where you're like, okay, let's have like a fun dessert, and you have more ideas that feel more
Yes.
supportive. You
Absolutely.
don't have to just be like, I'm never gonna have it, a dessert.
Mhm.
Um,
I did grab some tahini. You and I had talked about that a couple weeks ago, and it's okay. I think I just need to find the right dish or the right food to put
yes,
it on.
it's a good one
I'm
to
just a
prepare.
little bit,
This brand Cava, Cava, I just tried
uh-huh.
it. Whole Foods had some, so they were like flavored tahini sauces. So I can't remember exactly what the flavors were. And I had my girlfriend try it with me. She was like, I think I definitely need to have this with like, yeah, with like a shrimp rice vegetable dish, maybe, or like
Sure.
chicken and rice. But it would have to be, yeah, like paired with something because it is like just a nutty flavor. It is
Yes, I
what
agree.
I
And I
can't.
think what I got was like a sesame, but I think I'm like, this would be something to me it was I think I would like it more with Asian based probably dishes or cultural
Mhm.
foods. I think they would
Yes,
work well
Asian
with that.
based. It's
So
yeah, and it's actually a Greek food.
Is
So,
it?
like,
Wow.
if you ever go to Mediterranean restaurants where they do, like pita lamb or, like, falafel where it's, like,
Mhm.
ground chickpeas and, like, cucumber tomato, they oftentimes will have tahini dips. So, it's not something I necessarily make a lot, but I do really love, like,
Sure.
food. But, yeah, I mean, you could definitely experiment
Very
with
good.
that. Have you ever
Very
had
good.
falafel?
No,
Yeah,
nope.
it's if you ever get the chance to go to the one in East Village, the Greek place, or at, like, a farmer's market or something that they have it, I think it's probably one of my favorite, like, plant substitutes for meat. It's definitely not gonna be as high in protein as meat, but it's just
Hmm.
chickpeas with, like, spices, but they, like, fry it into a ball, so it's got, like, a crunchy outer. It's really good, I think.
Oh, wow. It
Really good.
sounds, it's falafel, you said?
Yes, yes, I have yet to ever make it myself, but I need to.
Wow. Okay. All
So,
right. And I don't think I had any other questions. Like the sweet drops, is that some, I mean, I guess I'm not familiar with that. I do water drops and they're kind
that
of like
one
just like
we
a
have
little
tried to look
chunk.
at them that one time at Campbell's. They were there was all those different flavors of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, yes.
Mm. So, like, for I think that they're good with coffee or, yeah, like a seltzer if it's like
Okay, got it,
a
got it. Yes,
plain
I remember that now.
plain drink, but you could also do them in, like, oatmeal. Like, I use
Mhm.
for the vanilla sometimes, I'll put that with oatmeal with, like, a little
Oh,
protein.
good
Maybe
idea. Good idea.
yeah.
And then one more before we go here about the sourdough. So I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but is there such thing as a gluten-free sourdough or is sourdough gluten-free?
No, that's a really good question. So, okay, so sourdough is technically not gluten-free,
Okay.
because of I believe it's, like, there's gluten in the yeast or something that it's made with.
Hmm.
However, because of how it's fermented and broken down compared to other breads that are just, like, baked differently,
Hmm.
our bodies can really digest that gluten super easily. And so there are people I know of, like one of my friends, she will get skin reactions to most gluten, but she does okay with real sourdough. Um,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, I think in moderation, especially if we look back at, like some of your testing and see how you're doing, you could definitely add that in. It is just like looking at, like, compared to, like, I've seen some sourdoughs in some grocery stores that are kind of more mass produced. They're gonna have some
Yeah.
added ingredients. It might not go as well compared to the one I get at, like, Gateway Market that's
Hmm.
baked and, like, doesn't have any preservatives and different ingredients. So,
Hmm.
and same with, like, the Ezekiel bread is not gluten-free, but it's
Yeah.
the way it's made is definitely more nutrient dense and might be
Got
better.
it. Got it. Okay.
Um, yeah,
I
I
guess
think,
those are all the questions that I had.
yeah, and I mean, there are gluten-free breads. Also one of those things that don't always get the best feedback on. People say they did not taste good. So I would say trying to just learn those other gluten-free starts
Sure, sure.
and
We did we did try in some eggs the dairy-free plant-based shredded cheese and it wasn't bad. I didn't use very much of it, but it was just enough to say,
yeah,
"Hey, I've got cheese on my eggs." It
yeah,
wasn't terribly bad. It was almost kind of plasticky. You know what? I don't know. It was kind
yeah.
of a weird
I
texture.
had some vegan pizza like last weekend at this birthday party, and I was like, it tastes similar, but I'm not quite sure.
Yes, yes, it's just a
What
different
about
texture. It's like, I could probably just go without, just like be without it. It's okay.
yeah.
Okay, I don't think I have any more questions. I appreciate you doing this.
Awesome. Well, yeah, have a great rest of your night, and I will talk to you next week at our
Uh,
coaching call.
all
Okay?
right. Thank you. Bye
Bye.
bye.